Well, welcome to the Unstoppable Freedom Podcast. I'm Jimmy Page. Well, like it or not, we find ourselves in the middle of a culture war where the battle lines are no longer right versus left, but instead they're really good versus evil. There's a dramatic evidence of an active, coordinated global revolution going on that targets all Western nations and everything that we stand for. Things like life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Things like faith, family, and freedom are all in the crosshairs so that the global elites can usher in one world government and eliminate individual rights and freedoms. Well, in America, everything about our founders, everything about our founding documents, our values, and beliefs is under attack. And the bullseye of the target is our children. It's hard for me to even say that. The anti-American, anti-parents, anti-religious freedom agendas, and even political activism in our public schools is threatening our future. Well, if this sounds bleak, we've got some good news today. Millions of Americans have woken up and organizations have stepped up to defend American freedom and values. Our guest today is Alex Campana. She's the director of the Center for 1776 at America First Policy Institute. She's a mom, and she's also the wife of a law enforcement officer, so she has a vested interest in protecting kids and promoting our founding values and culture to preserve liberty for generations to come. Alex, welcome to the podcast.
Well, thank you for having me.
So listen, you represent America First Policy Institute, and it's incredible to me, but doesn't even the name America First create opposition today?
Sadly, I think you're right. It does. Just the same way that some people hanging an American flag outside their house, people find that polarizing nowadays, which
Yes.
is so sad.
Yes. You know, it's funny about the flag. So I pretty much wear shirts with a flag on it all the time now, just to make the point that I'm proud about this country. I'm proud about our history, and I'm
Mhm.
really hopeful about our future. Do you feel hopeful about the future?
I do. I really, really do. And I think the parent revolution is one thing that does give me hope because I've seen it just over the
Mm.
last 4 years. As a parent, there's nothing you want more than the health and safety and happiness of your
Yeah.
children. And I think that parents are really waking up to what's in the schools and this agenda that's being forced on their kids, and they're not happy about it.
Yes, big time. And you know, we live in the same town here in Colorado, so
Yep.
I'm very familiar with what you're talking about locally.
Yep.
Unfortunately, the school districts here in northern Colorado are on the leftist fringe for sure. It's a battleground for sure. So super happy to have teammates here. You know, if we go all the way back to America's founding fathers, which also, by the way, are being demonized and destroyed, and we're pulling
Hmm.
monuments down for goodness sake. They recognize that all men are created equal, that they're endowed by their creator with certain unalienable rights. You know, what is undermining that basic level of truth in America right now? What's undermining that?
Well, I think the basic thing that we're seeing here is the left wants to destroy the family and wants to destroy the family
Mm,
unit. And we've seen that all across our schools. We've seen that with them, undermining our founding and everything that we were created on, that this country was created on, all the values this country was created on,
mm,
and their blatant attack on faith. And
yeah.
our country was founded in these certain ideals, and
Mm,
it was founded for a faithful people, to be honest.
yeah.
And now there's this blatant attack on faith, and on the family unit, and we're seeing
Mm,
its effects across all areas of public
yeah.
policy, but particularly in our schools with our education system.
Yeah, that's amazing. And you know, I think that um, we'll talk a lot about schools today because I know this is a heartbeat of what you're doing, and it's a key part of the policy that America First Policy Institute is implementing, specifically the Center for 1776. Tell us a little bit about your mission, your strategy for the Center for 1776.
So, just taking it back a little bit,
Mm,
before I was at America First Policy Institute, I was on the White House Domestic Policy Council under
mm,
President Trump. And one of
mm,
the very last projects I was fortunate enough to work on and be a part of was the 1776 Commission.
mm,
It was a huge deal in the White House. President Trump was, all in on patriotic education. We wrote the
Mm,
1776 Commission report. And then, of course, President Biden, day one, what does he prioritize? Disbanding the commission. Doesn't make any sense to me, but it's
yeah.
just the world we live in right now. And
Yes.
so at the Center for 1776, we're all about, at our core, patriotic education,
Mm,
and ensuring, excellent and quality education for all of our kids.
mm. Yeah, and you know what? It's interesting because that is the battleground, right? I've
Hmm.
got so many questions on the educational side, and we've been in the fight now for 3 years on the educational side. I've told the story many times about how my daughter and I, during the great exposure, which was the COVID era, when all of our eyes were open to what was actually happening in our schools because our kids were, a lot of them, learning remote.
Yep.
I got to see firsthand the political indoctrination, the anti-American bias, the anti-family, faith, freedom, all of it. The fact that our schools have televisions on the wall that pump CNN, no kidding, into the schools all
Hmm.
year long. It's like this 100% indoctrination campaign. This is all happening. We got this all exposed. But before we talk about the specifics in the school, let's talk a little bit about American patriotism as a whole, because I think it starts there, right? Because if we have a patriotic approach to things, we're not going to let this nonsense happen. We just celebrated the birth of America, July 4th, Independence Day. Can we take a look at some of the kind of concerning stats around around American patriotism today? I know that I've seen some stuff on your website that really kind of got me super concerned all of a sudden.
Yes, yeah. So, you know what? Let me pull them up for you because I
Yeah.
want to make sure I'm giving you the most updated figures because we actually just put something out on this.
Oh, that's great.
Um,
And I think that I'll fill the space here for a second. I think this, when you generation after generation continue to tell people that America is bad, and we focus on all of our flaws, which, by the way, every nation has flaws. But if you focus on the flaws, you're eventually going to start to indoctrinate people to really think negatively about it. I can't even imagine if I got drafted by the New York Yankees and I'm going to play for them and I join the team, but I hate the Yankees. I can't even imagine me telling my teammates, hey, I hate the Yankees. Yeah, but you play for the Yankees. What do you mean you hate the
right,
Yankees? You know,
right.
it doesn't make any sense. You can't fix something that you hate. You will only fix something that you love and admire and see a positive future for. So these, patriotism stats are super concerning.
No, no, I completely agree. So, according to the most recent numbers, um, only 38% of Americans consider patriotism to be very important. But what's so
Mm,
shocking about this is
wow.
the 38%, yes, but also that that's down from 70% in 1998. So, if you think
Yeah.
about that, that's what, 26 years? And we went from 70% of Americans considering patriotism to be very important to 38%. What
Okay.
happened over those
Uh,
26 years? You have to ask yourself. It's sad and it's scary.
how can, so man, that is scary, especially when you talk about 70% just
Yeah.
in essentially one generation ago. How,
Hmm.
so the indoctrination is complete, right? I mean, if you can get a country to hate itself, it will eventually destroy itself, right?
Right. No, I think that's exactly right. And you're right. It's a generational thing. If you look at voters age 18 to 34, that
Mm.
number drops down to 18% being extremely proud to be American.
My gosh. So, okay, so this seems like a pretty easy conclusion to make, right? I think we could tie this to the educational indoctrination of our kids. I mean, parents aren't waking up every day telling their kids how horrible it is that they've got all these opportunities in this country. And no matter where you start, it doesn't determine how you finish as long as you work hard and you have, I mean, parents aren't
Yes.
waking up telling kids that all these things are bad. Who's telling our kids that America is bad?
Well, I mean, I think you're right. It's in the schools, but it's in everything that our kids view. As a parent,
Mm,
there's so many TV shows, movies, things like that that are geared towards kids that I would never let my daughter watch.
mm,
These messages are everywhere. It's not like they're going to school and they're hearing about this and then they come home and whatever. No, because anything you're putting on the TV for them, it's
mm,
showing, these similar messages that break down the family, break down faith,
yes.
and it's all over social media as well. So that population, that 18 to 34, they're all on social media. They're all seeing these different messages and things. So I think it might stem from our education system, but it's also the content that's being put in front of our children.
Wow. And you mentioned the need or the fact that there is a parent revolution right now. I think you're right. I mean, we've got you guys, of course, on the front lines. We've got Moms for Liberty. We've got Parents
Yep.
Defending Education. We've got groups that are that are forming all around the country because we're appalled at what's being taught in our schools. I think this parent revolution, it's not just the schools, like you said, it's all the content. It's the boycott
Yes.
Disney. You remember when we were boycotting Disney? Well, families are still taking their kids to Disney. And I
Right.
can't for the life of me understand why we would support an organization that is so actively engaged in destroying the family. And yet we do it.
Right. And I have also seen the parent revolution in other places other than schools. Like you just said,
Mm,
it's with different content things. Miss Rachel. Have you heard of
mm.
Miss Rachel?
No.
You have kids? Okay, Miss Rachel. I have a baby, so anyone that's listening or watching that has babies, they will understand this. Um,
We have a generation gap here. I'm old enough to have adult kids your age. So okay, fill us in. We need you.
okay, so Miss Rachel, she's on YouTube. She has all these shows, millions and millions of views.
Mm,
I think she's a speech pathologist, and
mm,
she puts out content for kids. Well, recently she decided that she was gonna weigh in on Pride stuff and start doing some of the LGBTQ stuff.
mm,
She was gonna weigh in on Israel and Palestine, and parents don't like that. They wanted
mm,
a show that their kids watch that gives their children good speech techniques, teaches
mm,
them to talk, colors, numbers, whatever it might be. They don't want the political indoctrination. And so
mm.
parents all across the spectrum started to quote cancel Miss Rachel.
Wow.
And that's where I think, parents really are waking up because they just want to put some like good, wholehearted, genuine, 1990s style Disney content in front of
Yes.
their kids. And it just
Yes.
doesn't exist anymore.
No, it doesn't. And these messages, like you said, are everywhere. And of course, with all the screens, the proliferation of screens, so many parents now are putting their kids in front of screens thinking it's
Yes.
safe. And I think we've probably done that for the last 20 years when the content really isn't. It's eroding our values, so much of what they see. I think back to Andy Griffith's show, Little House on the Prairie. I mean, I would make this required viewing in American public schools because the principles, the relationship, the things that you see, it supports your values.
Yes, yeah, it's so different now. I personally don't let my daughter watch shows because you
Yeah,
just don't, especially the new ones, you just don't know what's going to come out in them. A number of shows were pushing a Pride Month agenda in
yeah,
the month of June. Why?
mm,
I mean,
yeah,
why are you pushing that on
mhm,
little children? It doesn't make sense to me, but I think, that's part of the bigger problem. It's in our schools, but it's also in
yeah.
everything else that our children see and are a part of.
It is. It's funny because there's an organization called Gays Against Groomers, and they are standing against all this nonsense of where we're targeting our children with these
Hmm.
messages. They don't even agree with targeting kids. They're all saying leave the kids alone. It's one thing to decide, make those decisions when you're an adult, but to indoctrinate your children and to expose them when they're so impressionable. We know that they're so impressionable at 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years old. And even that community doesn't agree with this full blown propaganda around LGBTQ.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. The majority of Americans don't believe in pushing this on children and know that it's gone too far. When you're talking about irreversible medical procedures and hormone therapies for minors, the majority of Americans don't think that that's the right way to do things.
Mm,
They don't think that should be happening, and they definitely don't think that schools should be pushing that on children
yeah.
without parental consent or knowledge, or even in general. Schools should not be talking to children about that.
Yeah, that's right. Well, it's funny in Colorado, as you know, we have these wonderful laws that allow
Yeah.
secret conversations between teachers, faculty, even independent contractors on these campuses who come in to teach our kids. It's perfectly okay to have secret conversations with these kids up to the age of 12 and without parental involvement or knowledge. And we've
Yep.
seen time and time again that parents are being carved out. Now, that is part of the Communist Manifesto, of course. I mean,
Yes,
if you want to get
exactly.
really serious about this is actually the strategy, right? One of the top strategies of the Communist Manifesto is indoctrinating, in this case, American children in anti-American, anti-God, anti-family ideologies
Hmm.
at the top of their list, and they're doing it.
They're doing it, and they're not only doing it, they're doing it in a way that they're proud of, and they're showing it off. It's not even
Yeah,
like this is a secret agenda. Like you
right.
just said, it's Colorado law that children over
Yeah.
12 can consent to mental health treatment without any sort of parental knowledge or consent. It's written on school district web pages that they
Mhm.
will create gender support plans without parental knowledge. And beyond that, that they are
Mhm.
to refer to the child by whatever,
Mhm.
name and pronouns they're given to their parents, but then something else at schools. And it's not like this is some hidden agenda or something
Yeah.
that they're trying to not put out there. It's
Mm.
literally on school district websites, and it's things
Yeah.
that they're defending, that they're proud of doing.
Mm. It's amazing. Well, I think there is some good man, like this fires me up, right? Because as a parent, one of our jobs is to protect our kids,
Yep.
mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, all aspects of their development. It's our responsibility, 100% our responsibility to direct every aspect of their upbringing, including their education. And so we don't check our civil rights. We don't check that responsibility at the public school door. In fact, we still have responsibility for these kids. And that's what makes me most hopeful because of the work that you're doing with educational policy priorities. I mean, you're talking about bringing not only patriotic education back into the schools, but also really kind of holistic American values back into the school. Let's talk a little bit about this because this is the stuff that I think gets our audience excited. We always talk about, well, what do we do? I mean,
Yes.
it's easy to complain, and it's so easy to complain about what's going on, but it's another thing to do something about it. That's why I really wanted you on the show, because I think in the end, not only are we going to talk about what can happen in your local communities, but I think we're going to empower parents to take some action to make a difference in their schools as well. So let's talk a little bit about legislation that you're working on to block political ideologies, in particular, like CRT, critical race theory. Let's talk a little bit about that.
Yes. So we actually have a package of legislation that we put
Mm,
together with our incredible friends at the National Association of Scholars. There's
mm,
10 policies in there to, block radical gender theory, to block critical race theory, kind of keep all those things out of our schools, but
mm,
also to increase accountability and transparency in our schools. Because another thing that we realized is that while the vast majority of Americans support the notion that parents should have access to all curriculum and
yeah,
anything their children will be learning, that's just not the case in a lot of schools right now. Like you said,
mm,
in COVID, it was the case. And that's why a lot of parents were like,
yeah,
whoa, what is happening here?
yeah,
But we have, legislation that states can pass that would increase that accountability and transparency, financial transparency in our schools.
mm,
So, what are our taxpayer dollars going towards actually? What's in
right,
the school budgets? What are they paying for? What independent contractors are they paying? Which is kind of an
yeah,
interesting one when it comes to this CRT and radical gender theory in our schools. We have social studies um, and civics education policy. We have a wide variety of
mm,
policies, like you said, that really get at the heart of this issue. And then another big thing that we focus on is school choice. So we have a dedicated
mm,
person on our team focused on school choice because no parent should feel like they're trapped in that
yeah.
school, or their child is trapped and they don't have options. Parents deserve to have options. And so at the end of the
Yeah,
day, we're working a lot on school choice as well.
it's amazing. I remember back when we first started ringing the bell on this idea that we needed a transparency of curriculum. I mean, this is such an important thing, right? And I remember in Colorado, of course, the indoctrination is complete in this state. I mean, you can't
Yes.
look at the curriculum, but what I think is disingenuous about this now is they're essentially saying, no, we don't teach CRT, we don't teach anti-American anything, and they essentially strip it out of the curriculum that we'll see. So now all of a sudden the standards for education in Colorado, well, they look decent. These aren't horrible because they got a lot of code words in there. And you have to be
Hmm.
really aware of what's actually being taught in the classroom. Our teachers, our educators are being trained in woke ideologies. So, regardless of what is even on the website and even what they state is the curriculum, we have to be present in these classrooms to make sure that they're not indoctrinating our kids, don't we? I mean, don't parents have to kind of come together
Yes.
and say, hey, let's get on a schedule to get into the classroom?
Yeah, so actually, by law, parents can request to observe classroom activity. So I would definitely recommend that if you're a parent, go sit in.
Yes.
Even if, if you don't learn anything about what curriculum's teaching or you don't see anything like that, it's a really good opportunity for you to see the learning style that they're presenting to your child and to
Mm,
build a relationship with the teacher. Because I want to go on record saying that I do not think that all teachers are bad. Most teachers, I think, are working really hard to support our children. But
mm,
unfortunately, like you said, they're being trained in this way. And this ideology
mm.
has infiltrated all of our schools and our school board policies.
Yes.
But as parents, yes, you can definitely go in and observe your classroom activity. We also have a
Mm,
parent toolkit, and Jimmy, I'll send it to you after
mm.
this.
Awesome.
That gives parents different options on things that they can do to get involved in their kids' schools, and like you said, gives them different words to look out for because oftentimes things might not look or sound that bad. But then you dig into what they actually mean, and you're like, oh, whoa, I don't support that.
Yeah.
So we have resources on that parents can look into. And then the other thing I would say to look out for is supplemental materials. So you
Mhm.
have your standards in your curriculum, and then you have your supplemental materials and activities. And those are the ones that teachers bring into classrooms as kind of the outside, like learning things that they bring in. And I would say that you need to be diligently looking out for those as parents because that's where I've seen a lot of the problems occur.
Mm.
It's not so much in the standards, but it's in those extra supplemental materials that are getting brought into the classroom.
Yeah, that's good. I think I'm really anxious to see the parent toolkit, and we'll get that in the
Yeah.
hands of our listeners because it's so important that they know that they have resources and they know how to do this. We've helped equip parents all around the country to be able to push back at the meetings, to be able to express their opposition to certain things that kids are being taught. And I think their eyes have been open to what's actually happening in their schools. It's interesting too. One of the things we saw during this whole exposure was a lot of the what I would consider a lot of the faithful Christian teachers in our public educational system. They got so worn out. In fact, they're exhausted by this woke ideology, by the indoctrination. They're exhausted. And so many of them have left the public school education because they either A, can't participate in the curriculum that we're teaching our kids, and
Hmm.
B, they can get in trouble if they don't. So
Yes.
what do you tell the teachers that are in the trenches that are bringing not only American values but Christian values into the schools? Because I've been involved in the schools through ministry through the Fellowship of Christian Athletes for years and years, 20 years. It's the reason that we're there is to continue to push back for faith. What do you tell those teachers that are exhausted and don't know what to do to push back?
Well, one, I would say thank you, and we need you, and we need good teachers like that. I have had,
Mm,
a few cases where teachers have come to me and said, "Hey, like I'm being let go for standing up for things
yeah,
like this.
yeah.
This is just an unbearable work environment for me. I need to get out." And they'll go to
Mm,
private or charter schools. They'll teach homeschool pods.
mm,
So I think there
mm.
are alternative options, but we do need those good, strong teachers in our public schools. Our
Yeah,
kids need them. So
yeah.
thank you to any of you that are out there that have stayed strong and diligent in your faith and your values in our schools.
Yes, amen to that. And I'm kind of at the place now where I just feel like we have to become more and more honest and vocal. And no matter where you are, if you find yourself as an attorney or in the schools or in a regular business, in any aspect of our culture, it's like, no, we need to stand up for our values, be honest about it, and there may be consequences. The
Yes.
question is, we just came off July 4th. we have 56 founders who signed away essentially their freedoms. They signed away their life, their fortunes. They pledged this. 56 people were willing to put this on the line in order to establish a nation that was founded on God-given rights and values and freedom, liberty. Are we standing in an age right now where we're going to need to do that in mass? We're going to need to stand up for these founding values, for our faith in the public square.
I think the left likes to try to intimidate and scare parents and individuals from standing up for our families, for our faith, for our values. But like you said, we need that now more than ever. We need people to stand strong, to be unafraid, to speak out against these things, because the majority of people, from the data that I've seen, they want, to teach their children the truth about American values. They
Yes.
don't want these radical theories in our schools. They want curriculum to be made publicly available. They don't want their kids being told by teachers that if they're a girl, they could be a boy. So if
Yes.
we stood up together unafraid and stood strong in those values, we can really make change and we can really make a difference. And I think that we have. I truly do.
Yes.
From the state level and passing policies in our states to the school board level, we've had a revolution of getting, America First school board members elected to school boards. And it's, groups like Moms for Liberty are doing a ton of work on that on the ground in the states. But it's remarkable to see even people with conservative values running for school board, because I just don't even think that was happening. Just a few years ago, these boards were just kind of dominated by hand-picked people by the teachers union. And that was another reason why all of these sort of horrific policies were getting passed at the school district level, because there was nobody defending those values that were part of the board. And now we have board members that, they're there to defend those values that we've talked about, and we actually have a toolkit for them too. So we have a lot of school board members that are just, your neighborhood mom and dad that said, I am done and I am running for school board. And we thought, okay, how do we equip them once they're in? So we created a school board member toolkit that kind of goes through their roles and responsibilities as a school board member. The curriculum adoption process, we have a ton of different research and writing on that we, give over to school board members. And we're here to be a resource to them as well.
That's amazing. Okay, so far, to encourage our listeners, we have a parent toolkit, which helps you understand what you can do to push back and bring good old-fashioned values to your schools. And now we've got a school board member toolkit as well. We're going to make all these resources available to our listeners. This is big time, because now the people that are always sitting there, well, what do I do? What do I do? Well, here you go. We're going to tell you exactly what to do. And, this is such a great encouragement to me to hear this. I didn't even know that those resources were there. We've produced a number of things from Unstoppable Freedom on our website as well. Things that help parents ask questions about whether they should put their kid in that school based upon answers they get from teachers and administrators. We've had friends that, let's talk about 3 more topics in this educational space. Let's talk a little bit about. Well, thanks for tuning in to part 1 of a 2-part series with Alex Campana of the America First Policy Institute. Stay tuned for part 2, where you're going to hear more about the specific initiatives that they're engaged in to take back our educational system and instill a patriotic future for America. See you then.